Well, thank you guys. We're excited to kick off another cannabis lab here. I think we're on a hot topic, which is, very consistent with the current times. We finally got a rule this year after it was put into statute a while back in relation to edibles here in the state of Florida. But across the country, we've seen edibles rules come into fruition, a variety of different products, companies, etc. And so we've got a great panel assembled for tonight. Title was Edibles. Can you have your cannabis and eat it too? And I'm your host, Eric Stevens of Florida for Care. We worked on passing Florida's medical amendment and continually working on its implementation. And we've got a great panel ahead of us tonight. We've got Brian Schuettler from the Division of Food Safety with the Florida Department of Agriculture. We've got Joe Hodas, the Chief Marketing Officer for Wana Brands. We've got Pete Feurtado Jr., the CEO of Big Pete's Treats. We've got Scott Jennings, the CEO and founder of Pantry Food Co. And we've got Laurie Wolf, the founder of Laurie and MaryJane. And so, guys, without further ado, if you want to start from the top with Brian, then Joe, Pete, and Scott, if you guys want to delve in briefly and discuss a little bit about your company, where you're based out of, and then we can kind of delve into the questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Schuettler. I'm with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Division of Food Safety. I've been with them for about 21 years, a little over 21 years. Done everything from regular inspections in retail to a supervisor in the middle of the state for 8 counties. And then now I'm on the quality assurance and training team, so to speak, but I'm a side shot of that one. Most of my time I've been spent with doing the implementation of the preventive controls rule, which is the new GMP 117 aspect of things. That's what I've been doing for the last mainly 5 years, roughly. MMTs and MMTCs and hemp also fall into my lap for some unknown reason. So that's kind of what I do. I go around, I am outside of Sebring, Florida is where I work out of. And I cover basically from Key West to Pensacola to Jacksonville. The whole state, for the most part, is where I cover.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Joe? If you want to just give a brief, yep, you're unmuted.
How are you?
Doing great.
Good. Joe Hodas, Chief Marketing Officer for Wana Brands. Wana is the largest edibles company in North America. We have a pretty extensive footprint, about 9 states and now 2 countries. We are also in Canada, and we are on the dawn of launching into Florida with our partners that moved on AltMed. So that will be hopefully coming here in the next month or so. Very excited about that. Have been in this crazy industry for about 7 years now in various capacities, one of which my original role when I got into the industry was Chief Marketing Officer for Dixie Brands, another company that has a presence throughout the country. And so have come in and out of various markets over the past 7 years, and have looked at the various state regulations and how partnerships work and how they don't work sometimes. And very excited to have this discussion today. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very, very, very much. All right, Pete, do you want to go?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. My name is Pete Feurtado. I'm the CEO of Big Pete's Treats. We're a family business. We started in 2010. We're out of Santa Cruz. Right now we're in California. That's our home state. And we have the #1 selling baked good brand in California. And we are coming soon to Florida with Liberty Health Sciences. And very happy to be here today. And thank you guys for having me.
Fantastic. Scott and then Laurie in no particular order.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. Hey, everybody. My name is Scott Jennings. I'm the CEO and founder of Pantry Food Co. Pantry is located in Venice, California. I started Pantry out of the desire of a consumer myself looking for a healthier alternative. So we're focused on plant medicine, combining whole food ingredients with powerful cannabinoids to give you the functional ingredients to live, a healthy lifestyle. We're expanding to Canada, Colorado, got our eyes on Florida, and just looking for other health and wellness warriors to align with. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight. Laurie?
I'm Laurie Wolf. I have the edibles company, Laurie and MaryJane. we started as a medical company, but when we could become recreationally legal, when it was legal, we became, yes, we became recreational. We have about 12 products. We have baked goods and a line of fudge called Fudge Yourself. It's a family business. My daughter-in-law is my business partner, which really works surprisingly well. I know more about my son than I ever would have imagined. And we are getting ready to be in California, and we're looking to Florida and a couple of other states.
Awesome. And so, Laurie, and you're based in Portland, correct? That's
Yes.
where you guys have started out of. Wana started out in Colorado. Am I correct on that? Pete, you were out in California, and Scott, you're located in what state?
California, Venice, California.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be helpful. As we delve into this conversation, I think the variety of different states, what changes and regulations there may be, as well as from cannabis products versus hemp CBD products. So without further ado, if you guys want to talk, I guess we'll go to the people who are actually functioning in the other states, and discuss kind of what's changed most recently for your company in relation to the regulation and compliance in the states where you are, and maybe some of the things that you are keeping in mind as you're looking to some of the new markets, whether it may be Florida, the recent rules released here, or maybe some of the changes that have happened where you're located. So if whoever wants to kind of take that first, if Joe wants to go, or if you guys want to start on the back with Scott and then work it back however you guys want to go.
Sure, I'll go ahead and kick it off. I mean, obviously with this past election cycle, there have been some interesting changes, right? So Arizona legalizing, we've been in Arizona for a little while now, and now that it will become a rec state, it's going to mean a completely different set of rules and regs, and we're going to have to adapt to those pretty quickly. But of course, the market opportunity there is huge, and it's great to be in a market that is changing by already being there, right? So that makes a huge difference versus going in after the fact. I think there are some pains in that crossover for companies that already are there, because we have existing packaging, we have existing distribution platforms. All those things will need to change versus coming in completely new to the market. But I think, again, the market opportunity and having visibility there and penetration into stores, I think is going to benefit us immensely in the long run. Florida, of course, with finally announcing the rules around edibles, made a huge impact for us, and we quickly scrambled, right? It was kind of wait, and then all of a sudden, boom, it hit, and everyone's kind of running for how can we get into Florida as quickly as possible, being compliant, of course, and making sure that we're following all those rules and regs. And just those are two examples of the many for the states that we're in, where each market is obviously vastly different from, what do we put on the labels to, what is the symbol for the state? What type of packaging works in one state doesn't necessarily work in another. Florida requires inner packaging inside of the outer packaging. And they use, as I was going through some of the regs there, we're using different language about container versus packaging, and learning each of those on a state-by-state basis is challenging, but of course it also makes for a great job for compliance managers.
Yeah. We're about to enter the California market, and what the biggest challenge is for us is in Oregon, it can be 50, the whole thing can be 50 milligrams, and in California it's 100. So we are working towards, we infuse with just coconut oil that's infused with buds. We don't use any kind of solvent, anything other than just, the simple infusion. So it requires work to be able to get rid of the cannabis taste. Now that we've doubled, each thing is going to be double strength. So that's been the most challenging part. And I think we've done it. We had some experience because here in Oregon, we can do a 50-50, a CBD and a THC combination. But that's really been the most challenging for us, because it will have more of a taste than, you know, a BHO or a CO2. But that's what we want to do, because we are able to maintain, you know, most of the integrity of the plant. And we are hoping to go to Florida, and I don't really know what the rules are. I hear some of them now, and inside packaging and things, and yeah, but I'm guessing Florida is a bit of a way off. It's a challenging industry.
I'm glad to pick it up a little bit there. You know, here in California, what we've been keeping our eye on is increased standards that are coming down the pipeline around organic, right? So if you look at the regulations and you think about, you know, what are the claims people are making on their packaging, and is there anybody regulating those claims? I think that's been a little loose in California. I'm going to go on. Yeah, so just jump back in there. So in California, you know, we're looking for those increased regulations to make sure that products are accurate, right? As a brand that cares about a clean label, we want to make sure that those statements match what the ingredients are in the product. And on the flip side, what we're seeing is that California just relaxed its standards on the precision of the dose in a product. So you used to have to be within 10%, and now they've gone down to 12%. And, you know, just speaking out loud on regulations, I think that's going the wrong way. I think they made it a little bit easier, but anybody that's had an edible, they'll tell you, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into that, and people have different experiences, and people are looking for as consistent as an experience as they can have. So we're actually, you know, testing close to 6% right now, and we're trying to go the other way than that. And just to touch on the other markets, you know, Colorado and Nevada, unlike California, they want a THC symbol on every piece. And that's been, you know, a really tedious process for Pantry as we, you know, make beautifully designed products, and then now having to go back and look at our production and how we went about producing these to get a THC symbol on each little piece that's about a ½ inch by ½ inch is a very difficult achievement. But, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and we've made it happen. And just the regulations that are different in different states to be able to launch there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think well said by everybody on the panel. I mean, and I think Joe really hit on it when he said adapt, right? If you're getting into the cannabis industry, into the edible market, be ready to adapt, you know, and especially like in the early years when legalization was just rolling out, it seemed like every week the rules are changing, and you know, so be ready to adapt. And I would say kind of the first biggest hurdle, I think that kept me up at night was the testing and making sure, okay, are you gonna be within that margin? And we've got it to the point where it's so dialed in. You know, I agree with Scott where, hey, I mean, I guess if we are at 11 or 12% on a batch, we'll be happy with the new regulations, but we've got it to the point where we're within, you know, we're closer, you know, to where Scott's at is 5%, or really, really close to just nailing 100 on the dot every time. So, you know, and I think the biggest thing for us from going from the medical days to the adult use days is focusing on compliance, but focusing on being a real food manufacturer, right? Because that's what we do. We're in the cannabis industry. And I think for all of us, that's one of the most important things, is being a real food manufacturer. And you know, and I think everybody said it on the panel, but consistency, right? Everybody wants that consistent dose.
Yeah, for sure. And I think those were all great answers. And that's the other change I think I didn't mention before the question is, you know, as things change, whether it's between a THC market, a low THC market, hemp market, as well as the differences between as you go from a medical market to an adult use market, and how those regulatory schemes have changed. So I appreciate you all kind of touching on those. And then, yeah, thinking about, you know, Florida having the inner packaging, you know, having to have the stamps on each individual piece and what that, you know, has to take into account. But yeah, I think that that's really what it delves into. So let's, what are some different things to take into account as you look at Florida, and how does that change if it's a hemp-based product? You know, if we want to go back to Brian, if you want to talk a little about that from the department's perspective, and kind of what people are looking at and seeing as differences albeit testing, processing, facilities, et cetera, wherever you kind of want to discuss some of the differences that you've seen. I mean, obviously, I don't believe there's, the imprinted stamp of THC on hemp-based product, but wherever you kind of want to take that, and then anybody else that's kind of looked at the regs could weigh in from there.
So MMTCs for us in ag, we look at the food production only side of it. So DOH has their edible rule that dropped about a month ago or whatever it was. We have our rule, which is the 5K11 rule, which basically says that you have to be under preventive controls for the most part. And so for me, it's a matter of trying to, once their rules dropped and I looked at them and read them, it's a matter of trying to figure out where the lines are going to be crossed. So we'll be doing our inspection for a certain part of it, and then Department of Health will be doing their inspection under their regulations for the other parts of it. So it's a matter of trying to figure out where those lines are so we don't cross over on those. Ultimately, again, everything I do has, hemp is easier, so to speak, because that is 100% our rule. So we have all the testing, everything, the requirements for that. Whereas the testing side of it falls on DOH for us, Department of Health, which is a little different. So I have to keep those things in mind. And when I train the inspectors to go in there, the same things. Again, ultimately, like for instance, labeling is a big issue. Normally I'd be looking for a lot of different things, but ultimately the finished product is not a food, it's a drug. So therefore it really doesn't fall under the food rules, so to speak, the regulations. I believe the edible rule adopted the FALCBA, the Allergen Labeling Act, which was a good thing because I was concerned about the allergen side of things. Obviously, during production, it's one part of it, but the finished product, how they go about labeling it, will be under the Department of Health and not mine, not our division. So again, it's just trying to get with we're planning on doing some joint inspections with Department of Health to be able to kind of walk through it and say, okay, this is what you're going to be looking at, this is what we're going to be looking at, and then that way we're not over regulating, and at the same time we know where the lines are and where we don't cross. The hemp side of it, a whole different ball game. It's pretty much the same as any other food product. We're just basically the ingredient of hemp is an approved additive, so to speak, and whatever that is. It's kind of the same with the MMTCs. We're looking at the oil that they're putting in for that as an approved ingredient. However, we won't look at any part of that because that's under the Department of Health guidelines for us. Whereas any other hemp products, we would look at everything, including the incoming product coming in.
Great. I think that's definitely, helpful in kind of understanding how that differs, as it relates to hemp CBD products versus the THC products in the state because of the purview of who's kind of regulating those, as well as the specificity of some of the regulations as it relates to that. So being that you guys have some different experiences in a variety of states, what have you seen? I know Colorado did some good education on, the number of milligrams per piece, how many you should try, start low, go slow, etc. What are some of the best things you guys have seen, whether that's via actual things that the state has done, or whether funding revenue sources that they've put towards programs like that you'd like to see replicated, or potentially we might be able to see here to avoid potentially any issues in the future? Does anyone want to touch on that?
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in, because it's
sure.
kind of near and dear to my heart, the education aspect in Colorado. So a little bit of history: when first launched in January 2014, adult use legalization, the rule in regards to 10 milligram pieces was not in place. So we actually did have a couple of incidents that led to that rapid change in some of the regulation to move to a 10 milligram per piece situation. And I think it was, definitely the right thing to do. But we also, as an industry, got together, and there was a group of edibles companies, mine included at the time, which was Dixie, who worked on that Start Low, Go Slow campaign. We paid for the materials, we printed the materials, we put them in the dispensaries were on board with it. Eventually, we actually, as a state, began to fund the Marijuana Education Oversight Committee, of which I was lucky enough to be part of. That was led by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Education. CDPHE essentially funded and ran the program, but it allowed us to look at the education more broadly. So it was consumer education, it was youth prevention, it was, you know, whatever we felt like were the important issues at the time, we were able to focus on, create materials and disseminate those based on the state budget, but also input, not just from obviously industry. In fact, there was only a handful of us from industry on there. It was educators, it was youth leadership, it was a number of different people that came together to create these campaigns that I think were actually pretty impactful. And then the last thing I'll mention that wasn't in place initially, but as we developed the market here in Colorado, the state began to utilize work groups that were also cross-representative. So not just industry, not just people who were anti-cannabis, but everybody. So work groups of about 20 or so people. And as we were in the heyday of really creating a lot of this regulation, we would have annual work group development where a work group would be identified, people would apply, be selected, and then the work group would meet. And then that eventually became the regulation that was presented to legislature that they were then able to comment on and either implement and or modify. So that was, to me, hugely helpful. And it wasn't always like that. It was a little bit of this initially, and then once we began the work groups, everyone kind of came together and could see each other's points of view. Hugely beneficial.
Great. That was very helpful. Was there anything similar in Oregon or California that you guys have seen, you know, that either the state has done or that you've seen either individual companies doing similarly?
I mean, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I've seen a lot of proactiveness on the behalf of companies, but maybe I'm not informed enough because I haven't seen what I would like to see more from the regulators and more from the state. You know, like Joe, I'm huge on education. I think, you know, misinformation and lack of education is really one of the ways that we can, you know, stall the momentum, right? If somebody's not informed or they're not educated the right way. So to me, I want to see more education, and Pantry's doing more. You know, we put forward a dosing calculator on our website to help consumers try to figure out what's the appropriate dose based on their sex, their consumption history, their size, you know, their weight. And, you know, I just think that we can do more. So I'm always talking to companies, but I haven't seen anything in California, but I don't want to throw them under the bus and say they're not doing anything. So I don't know if Pete's seen something.
I'll second that. Yeah. No, you know, not much is being done in California by the state or the regulators. That's for sure. I do think that the 10 milligram serving size, 100 milligram per pack is probably a good thing, right? And probably a good place to start. You know, there was a lot of pushback early on people wanting higher dosages and you know, there's some people that can handle that, but I think the problem is when you just kind of get the new person coming into the store, coming from out of town, not you know, well versed in the industry, doesn't know the industry, you know, that could be a major issue. I think we've all probably overdosed on edibles at some point in our life, and it's not a good experience, you know, and so I like that 100 milligram dosage. I would kind of go back to the last question about Florida. One of the things unique, I believe, to Florida would be, like in California, we have the 10%, or it's now 12 over under, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't go over in Florida. I think that's going to be one of the bigger issues, you know, like, cause here, if you're within plus or minus 10%, you're good. If you go over by 1 milligram in Florida, now you have a big issue. You know, you're destroying product, you're remediating it, whatever you can do. But, you know, hopefully there can be a little wiggle room there. But I'm sure we'll figure out how to work around it. Maybe we start our target lower. Maybe we have a 90 milligram bag. That way, if it does go to 90, you're kind of within that range. But be nimble and be ready to adapt.
Yeah. I think that Oregon does not do enough to educate the consumer. We try to in the company. I've written a bunch of cannabis books. And what I try to promote is like, take a week and learn your dose and start low at even 2.5 milligrams. And throughout that week, as you increase, you find the dose that's most comfortable for you. there still is a push here in dispensaries, people wanting the highest dose at the cheapest price and thinking that it's going to be a better experience the more cannabis you consume, when in fact that isn't the case. And pretty much everybody who has used cannabis previously has had that, oh no, that experience, which I had a million times when I was developing recipes, just like a little taste, and then I'd have to go to bed, because I just couldn't. So I try to explain to people that it's less is more, and you can avoid getting to that bad uncomfortable, like that. You're not going to die, but you might wish you were going to die because it's really unpleasant. So, in our company, we try and inform people, and I think other companies do the same, but I don't think there's enough education from the OLCC, letting people know that really it's not about how much THC is in the product. It's kind of about everything that's in that cannabis product. And it's not just about being high. It's about your body feeling better, relief from pain, relief from stress. So like, to me, that's the most important thing. Just don't go in and ask for, give me the highest THC, and I'd like to pay less than $1.
And I'd like to just add to that. I saw in the chat that, bud tender education, right? So I think we're all about bud tender education, but I think, just it's not said enough. We're asking them to take on a great deal of education, right? One of the most important parts of the business is educating the consumer. And I just think that we're doing a lot on the bud tenders, but I think we can help them out, right? I think we can add more education programs around them so that they're not, the sole source of education for consumers.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important. I think, I think Colorado from all that I've seen has really started off and taken, this really to heart and pushed out, from the inside, as well as from the individual companies. And I think that we've seen in a lot of the other places, some of the companies trying to fill that void. But maybe as more adult use revenues come in, where there's able to be more education on those topics. And I do agree in some ways that I think where there wasn't the limited size and piece, milligrams per piece prior, I think that's probably helped people, but also letting them understand that, the onset time takes longer. It's a lot different than their experience, if they're a new user than anything they've ever experienced with an inhaled product. And so, I do agree though, there's a ton of education that goes into just the variety of products a person may try, and then having to remember those. So having some, leave behinds or other things like that people can reference and go back to in the bud tender education, the more of that, the better. I definitely agree with everybody's comments.
I do think real quickly though, it is worth noting, Eric, that I think there is the educational aspect of understanding how do edibles interact, conversion to hydroxy 11, all that good stuff that changes the effect of the product. But I think in terms of that consumer education of understanding that, oh, it's not just about, having 30% THC in the product, that there are other cannabinoids, there's terpenes, there are those elements to the plant that can create a more well-rounded and better effect for you. I think that's going to come with just time, because like the education we did here in Colorado, it wasn't around that, right? The state-led education was more around, hey, be aware about edibles, don't drive when you're consuming, those kinds of things. And I think the companies here and in other states as well have done a good job of continuing to roll that education out. But if you think about it in a parallel to, let's say, the wine industry, many, many years ago, people who like wine didn't necessarily know the different grapes and the regions and the soil that was grown in and all the sophisticated nature of wine that I think is today. I think we'll get there. I think we, though, as manufacturers, have to continue to push that envelope, put out better products, take risks with innovation, and drive that agenda.
100%.
I think during COVID, it's really harder to get the word out to the different dispensaries and to the bud tenders, because we can't be in there. Like, we used to try and have a representative, from the company be there, share a product, say, eat, half a cookie, and when you don't feel anything, don't eat the other half, because it can, take a long time. So I think it's a drag that we can. I mean, COVID is a drag for a million reasons, and much worse than, people and cannabis. But I think that it's the bud tenders who they're the connection to the patient, and when you go into a dispensary and your bud tender really knows, it makes such a difference in people's individual experiences. And all the things we'll be able to do when this ends, if it does, that's high on the list.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the state of Florida, they spent about $5 million on a, dry baked get busted campaign when this first passed, but I haven't really seen a whole lot since then. And, I was expecting more, especially with the recent rules. And so, let's hope as this moves forward, we don't have any taxes on our products here because they're medical at the moment. And so, they're going to have to look between licensing fees and ID cards and everything else, how they can do that as they continue to grow their staff. But I think we all agree on one thing, and that's the more education we can continue to do on this, the better. So I'm going to shift a little bit to a little bit of a question about products. Some products are made with milk or other products that may have different regulatory rules that go with them. So that may be for THC or hemp products. So whoever kind of wants to delve into this, but I'd also like Brian to kind of talk about some of those differences and how they may relate in Florida versus in any of the other markets that you guys are in.
I'll start real quick if you want. Back to your education just for a second. For me, I look at it on a different side of things. Obviously, the consumer side is probably DOH's responsibility on there. For the hemp side of things, we've done quite a bit of educational things. We've put on several webinars on various things. We have pamphlets out there on labeling, and I think we had some issues with lead in some products. So we talked about that at one point. But for me, for the MMTC, since there's only a few of them, I was able to reach out to a bunch of them prior to our rules going in place, and I actually taught them the food safety preventive controls course, which is a requirement before you can do this. So I had 8 of them there roughly. I think we had 20 people. So I was able to do that, as well as, throughout this whole process, my intention is to, after probably the first of the year, when a couple more get back online that I'm waiting for, is again to reach out to them all, get them on a call, and then, find out what the challenges they've been to try to get them so they're in a place where they need to be. Again, preventive controls is a little bit different. We're handling it like we do any other product in the state when it comes to the regulations. While we have our straight state regulation for the MMTCs, we also will still put them under our full preventive controls, which is the CFR 117 aspect of things. So when you're talking about allergen aspect of it, again, there's 2 aspects of it. That the labeling obviously is one part of it that will be handled for, again, as I said before, from my partners in DOH will do that in the finished product. But during the production, it's the allergen cross contact issues that you have to worry about. So when you're talking about milk versus that's, if you have a unique allergen, that's only one specific product. So if you have a milk chocolate and a dark chocolate and you're running on the same equipment, then there's clearly something that needs to be done with that. So there's a changeover that needs to be done, or a cleaning that has to be done, or some kind of a process in line. So you're scheduling, so you're not potentially contaminating the other product, the non-allergen product, with the allergen. And again, allergens is a big deal anyway, only because it's the highest amount of recalls. 37% of the recalls have to do with allergens. So that's kind of where I look at it. And in Florida, they took the inclusions out, so the nuts and the tree nuts and peanuts and stuff may not be it may not be an issue here currently, but milk definitely will be.
Great. And yeah, I want to commend you guys on continuing to put out good information. I believe you've had a webinar going on today and tomorrow as well with the department. And if so, we'll try and make sure that Rob shares that to our page if we haven't already, so that anybody who wants to delve more into that and what they're doing can check that out. If anybody else wants to talk about some of the differences that may relate to allergens, milk, expirations, whatever you may have seen in some other states, or as you look to Florida, feel free to weigh in on that, or we can delve in a little bit to packaging after that.
I can weigh in real quick. Just in California, I think the way we do it out here as far as the regulations is it has to be shelf stable, right? So except for, you can have like a can of butter product, right? That's kind of the one thing that they carved out. And, so like things like ice cream, right? You can't make ice cream. A lot of, that would be cool. But I think that's kind of where, I guess milk is bad. No.
I think the amount of milk is what I think is going to make a difference. We make a brownie and it does have milk in it, but it's not at all like an ingredient, in the top 5 of the ingredients in the brownie. We shared a kitchen with an ice cream company in Oregon. And I can say, just sharing a kitchen, it's kind of a nightmare trying to work with, milk, and the drains got clogged and it smelled horrible. And the ice cream was great, but working in that kitchen and seeing like the drains got clogged, and I just thought, it sounded like the best idea. And, it turned out to be a nightmare. And I didn't know about this. I don't know if the amount of milk in a baked good, and Pete, you do baked goods. Do you have milk in your products?
No, we make everything with can of butter, right?
Oh, okay.
Similar to how you do it, right? It's not
Yeah.
with oil. Yeah, everything we make is the long process to make the can of butter.
Yeah.
Spectrum. That's a big differentiator for our brand. But as far as, but no, we don't have so yeah, we use butter.
Yeah. Interesting.
Awesome. Well, no, and I think that, those are great things for people to take into account. I don't believe any of you guys are involved with beverages, but, in the Florida rule, they put out some rules for powdered drinks, but didn't talk about drinks at all. So just, some interesting things to keep in mind. But all right, so what are some differences in packaging and rules? I know we spoke briefly about that earlier and how it relates to, the state here. But what are some of the changes you've seen that may be similar to that in the states that you've worked in? And how have you found some, creative ways to still be able to work within the confines? Maybe it's child safe packaging, maybe it's opaque, maybe there was a rule change and you had to get rid of a variety of some of the containers or packages that you had, or the time frame, whatever kind of story you guys have seen or dealt with you want to go into there would be great.
I'll just speak quickly about Canada. Going to Canada, they really don't like any kind of creative packaging. They don't like any emotion. They don't like anything, right? So I think that it's almost a joke on how to dull down things the most on your packaging, because they want it all to look uniform. And, that's very, very different than the California regulations on packaging. But if I were to just speak broadly, I would hope for a simplification around packaging. It seems awfully cumbersome, expensive, and a lot of the plastic that's used isn't good for the environment. So, I haven't read anything to share with everybody on this call, but what I'm hoping for is a reduced or streamlined way around packaging, so it's not labels on labels or information on information, and makes it a little clearer or more accessible for the consumer to maybe scan a barcode and read more about the label online. So those are kind of my comments on the topic.
Yeah.
Scott, I wish I could tell you that I had some inside knowledge. I would tell you that we were going to get to that point with labels, but I can only say that after 9 states and 2 countries, every state is massively different. We made that argument to the state of Colorado so many times as they continue to pile on different language and things we need to put in the containers. And I made the case to say, it's a disservice to the consumer, because if the consumer, first of all, they're not going to read all that. But secondly, if they can't get to the really important information because it's buried amongst, everything else that you've got in there, you're doing a disservice to the consumer. And furthermore, like in Canada and some other markets where it has to be as plain as possible, you can't depict flavors, you can't depict, You know, I think that's a disservice to the consumer, because I want to know what's in what I'm eating. Like I'd like to know if it's cherry flavored, and I don't like cherry. I'd like to know that it's cherry and have that signifier on there, right? So there are a lot of challenges with the way that different markets approach the packaging. The good news is on the packaging, the actual containers, seems like everyone has gone towards opaque, child resistant, you know, and it's pretty consistent. But those labels, it's a killer, and it really does vary so significantly by market, even down to, you know, what is the size of the logo that's allowed and what is the size of the state mark on the label. So there is no good solution to it that I've seen yet, and would love to hear if anybody else has a good solution.
It does seem that having to pick the size of your package so that you can fit all the information on it. I mean, there's some packages. I mean, like, I'm an old person, but I can't read what, you know, I'm like looking up and trying to, I need a whatever it's called thing, to magnifying glass to see what it is. And half of it I don't really want to know. And I don't understand why it needs to be there and why people can't just, you know, look at it online. But, you know, I want to keep it small, and I want to, as small as it can be, but with the font size, and it's a drag. I have no solutions, but I think the packaging is problematic.
Well, just going back to what Joe said, I mean, it always, to me, goes back to the consumer, right? Like, I want to do right by the consumer, and I want it to be easy and understandable, right? And I think we've all been to the pharmacy at CVS, and they're like, sign this, you got a consultation, here's the big paper and all this other information. It's too much, right? And if you look at the stats around that, it's like 10% of people are actually reading all that information. So I don't know if I really understand the point. If it's to make sure all the information's there, but only 10% of the people read the information, I think, again, that's a disservice to the consumer, and it should be re-reviewed.
I think much like a lot of parts of the industry, because it's so nascent, it's definitely CYA, right? So if something was to happen, the states and the regulators want people to say, well, we had the warnings on there, you know, all the information's on the package. And I think as they begin to realize the sky doesn't fall, it is not the end of the world, and people can use these products safely with a little bit of education, a little bit of direction, some of that will begin to kind of peel off a little bit, and we'll get to a more reasonable amount. Although flip side is, if you look at Scott, to your point about the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, you know, you would think the same would be the case there, although they have a lot of information about contraindications and all that other stuff. But I, you know, I'd say 10%. I was shocked you said 10%. I think it's kind of high. I don't know anybody who reads that information. So hopefully the states will begin to, you know, pare it back a little bit over time. It's my hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think California has done it right here, right? I mean, I think it's very important to not be appealing to kids, you know, so, but there's also a lot of waste, and it's cannabis, right? We should be able to have a little bit of fun. So I feel like, you know, the rules in California on the packaging are, hey, it's strict, but you can have a little fun. You can brand it. You can build a brand in California. Whereas, you know, in Canada, even in Florida, right, it's going to be way more plain. There's going to be a small logo on there. But it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be a lot of fun. It's focused more towards medical, and you know, I just think cannabis should be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think those were all great points, and I think I think the state obviously was trying to take it as cautious an approach as it could to get started here. But I would expect that as we move forward over time here, that we'll continue to see smart changes. But I think that you made the point about, you know, what they don't want is for it to be appealing to kids, right? You know, they've tried to not have it resemble something where you wouldn't know that the product was versus a commercially available candy versus, you know, a product, which is why they've tried to create those labels and the stamps and everything else. And so, you know, there definitely are some complications to that, especially I think when they're changing things more abruptly and last minute and not giving anybody the lead time to know we're going to have to change all of these things or add this sticker or add this label, or we just bought a bunch of packaging that we're going to have to get rid of. And then also making sure that, that packaging is made with, made for food products, right? Because you can have a lot of problems with packaging that's not made for food products, and potential contamination, et cetera. So I think all those things, as we continue to move forward, need to be taken into account. And really, it just comes down to safety. So, all right, more specifically on products, and then there's a couple questions in the chat I'll try and get to as well. What makes it a little bit harder to make products with cannabis that have a consistent serving, but also have a good taste and aren't too overly tasting of cannabis, so that people are able to do that? Is there different methods that are used? What makes it harder or better? You don't need to give away any, secret sauces here, but just kind of wondering what kind of things you guys have seen, or what you think are good tactics that make your products stand out.
Oops. Sorry. I think I mentioned before, because we do, like with what Pete does, we're infusing coconut oil or butter. I think that it's the management of the spices and other flavorings in the product. If you're looking to completely get rid of the cannabis taste, I know that some people want that taste. And for me, most of our products, I don't want to taste cannabis at all. I prefer it not to be there. Although there are some flavors I think that pair well with cannabis. But for us, it's working with the recipes to kind of do a balance that will really limit the flavor. I know it varies from strain to strain. Some of them, when you've made the oil, it's like, oh, this is completely dreadful. And so I was like, yeah, this is kind of nice. So I think you need to, and it's going to change all the time if you can't get the same strain all the time. But for me, it's knowing how to balance and, keep the flavors that you want much more prominent than the flavor of cannabis.
I think that was a great answer. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think I can add to it. I mean, for Pantry, we don't use any artificial flavors, right? So trying to mask the taste of cannabis with natural ingredients, it's been a little bit trickier, but it doesn't mean we can't use a peppermint or a really dark, cacao, to mask it. Now, it also depends on the, infusion method, whether it's solvent or solventless, right? Solventless, probably, you're going to get more of that flavor. Yeah. Solvent, you'll be taking away more of that flavor, and it will be more consistent. So, but, you always go back to the consumer. You say, well, what does the consumer want? And it's amazing that some Northern California consumers say, hey, we really love the taste of cannabis. Yeah. It's an earthy taste that we got used to, and we like it, right? So we'd like it through a solventless process, maybe infused with hash, right? And then here in Southern California, they're like, we really like the solvent extraction because we like that kind of high. It's consistent. It's something we know, and we really like it. For me, I prefer not to taste the cannabis, quite frankly. I don't mind if I do, but I'd rather taste like natural, real quality ingredients. And, we've got a matcha product that's coming out. We've had to tweak it, probably more times than I can count. But, back to what Laurie said, it's about balance. It's about R&D. And I think some of the products on the market were just rushed to market, right? And they're trying to go through their iterations to figure out how to mask that. And I think just through R&D and trial and error, you can get there, but you have to decide what consumer you're going after and do they want the flavor or taste or not. I think all of them want a consistent experience, which is really difficult because as your tolerance goes up, when you took 5 milligrams 6 months ago and you take 5 milligrams today, it's going to be a different experience just because your tolerance isn't what it used to be. So all these factors kind of come into play.
Great. Yeah. That was awesome.
Sorry. One point on the butter, I think that we've done, to kind of mask that. I think it's important that you slow cook the butter, right? And instead, I think a lot of those products where you taste an overwhelming, like, ooh, like that just tastes like burnt weed, or, you know, because people don't know how to cook the can of butter, right? And they'll burn it. And if you burn the can of butter, that's going to be the worst tasting edible of your life, right? But if you can figure out a way to slow cook it, you know, and I think R&D, quality control, as far as the consistency, that's the number one important thing as far as consistency, just having good quality control procedures.
Awesome. I'm going to check the chat and see. Okay. So, consistent terpene labeling across states would be fantastic. What is the preferred method of delivery of product? Question of if there's a fresh baked product like an Otis Spunkmeyer cookie that's baked fresh in countertop ovens, or will everything be shipped from somewhere far away? Is it more like a package on the shelf or fresh baked at the 7-Eleven? I have clients who manufacture and freeze cookie dough, pucks, and the restaurants could smell of that, but not in the cannabis market. Regarding, and let me read through a couple of these and then you guys can kind of delve into whichever ones you are able to answer here. The Florida edible rule states all edibles must be produced by an MMTC in the MMTC's department approved processing facility. Does anyone know if there's an opportunity for co-manufacturing for MMTCs for someone who manufactures a unique mint and would want to bring it to the market? How large are the batches that Scott makes and Laurie makes? What is the average size? And if anyone wants to delve into some of those, I'll read through the last one here.
I mean, you know, the batches we make are, you know, 3,000-4,000 units, right? But it gets down to, you know, what size are the pieces, and our pieces are really small, right? We really like the snackability of a product. We're a low dose brand, so we don't like to just have one and be done, right? So we dose at 5, we've dosed at 3, we've dosed at 1 milligram before, and we want you to kind of have a couple of those. And as you go lower and lower, you know, you push up against that percentage barrier on accuracy, right? 10% on 3 milligrams versus 5 versus 10 gets to a smaller and smaller margin. But it, you know, minimized that cannabis taste even more. And so consumers that had the 1 milligram of 3 or 5, they don't notice any cannabis taste in it at all. Yeah. You could do a blind test taste with it or without it. And you know, that's my partner Paul's, you know, litmus test. He's always saying, would you have this product if it didn't have cannabis in it? And that's what we're trying to make. You want to make it tasty without the cannabis, and the cannabis is just an ingredient that enhances it.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Scott is saying. We want a product that is not compromised at all by the taste of the cannabis. And one thing I was going to say, something you mentioned, so we have a product, it's a line of fudge. I don't know if I said this, it's called Fudge Yourself. And it's 50 milligrams, which is as potent as it can be. And it's 10 servings. And when we first launched it, I could eat like just a tiny bit of it. And now, because I, you know, eat it probably more than I should, I'm up to like 30 milligrams. As I get, you know, I'm starting to need to increase, even like smoking. I'm not, you know, a few hits is not right for me anymore. I need like the whole joint. And I feel like, you know, when we're making this 50 milligram product and it's small, we really are stuffing a lot of this oil in the product, this is coconut oil in the fudge. And it's much more of a challenge. We have crackers that are 2.5 milligrams each, and that's easy. You would never know there was weed in it. But I don't know about in other places, but here in Oregon, people don't want the 10 milligram cookie. They just don't. They want the 50 milligram cookie. and eat the whole thing. You know, back in the medical days, there were people eating like 800 milligram, you know, brownies and 1,000 milligram, and you know, we're still standing. But covering up the taste, obviously, that, you know, is easier when the dose is lower.
I'll address the cookie question in terms of fresh baked versus packaged. I think we are a long way from fresh baked, and it has a lot to do with the regulations, what you can and can't do within the confines of a retail establishment currently for cannabis, but also the infrastructure. I mean, people, I think we brought up ice cream at one point, and you know, there were companies here in Colorado in the early days that were trying to do ice cream, and of course, if the dispensary doesn't have a freezer, then you got to buy the freezer, and then, you know, as was the case with drinks, which my first company made quite a few of, Dixie Elixirs. If the store doesn't have a refrigerator, you got to buy the refrigerator. When the refrigerator breaks down, then they call you, or they're taking competitive products and they're putting in your refrigerator, and there's, you know, it becomes this really slippery slope of managing that whole process. So I would say we are long way away from there. And I think one thing that many people don't know, and I think is, I don't know if this is the case in every dispensary in the country, but certainly in Colorado, I know as a reg, is you cannot sell anything that is not infused with cannabis, food-wise. Yeah. It can't be ingestible if it's not infused with cannabis. And when I first heard that rule, I kind of thought that's sort of weird. You can't get a bottle of water, you know, at a dispensary. Why would that be? But of course, the reason being they don't want you to take anything from a dispensary and think that it doesn't have cannabis in it when it does. So it does make a lot of sense, but it also limits what we do inside that footprint, and why a dispensary would want to invest in something like a freezer or a refrigerator or an oven for that matter. But I think it's also really just far down the road from regulations, because the food has to come packaged in child resistant packaging and labeled from the facility to the dispensary before it can even be sold.
And the testing, you know, would be hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good point. All right, let me see if there was one or two more questions. And just so you guys know, we're going to be trying to do an upcoming networker specifically for that in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. Besides our great event that we'll be having next week. If you use a double wall kettle, you won't scorch or burn. You can control the temp and avoid scorching. I've sold kettles in sizes for 5 gallon in small volume restaurants to 400 gallons used by Campbell Soup. There are different options for product moving in the vessel, and particles stay mixed. Nice. All right, great. If anybody wants to try and delve into whether there may be an opportunity to have some co-manufacturing for MMTCs or may know that, feel free. If there's anything else anybody kind of wants to share, either about themselves, how people can reach out to them before we head out here, feel free to do that. But I think this was a great discussion for everybody that tuned in and was able to check it out. And I hope that, you know, we can continue to work on these things and we can get more involved as these rules and regs continue to change and work together to get something that works best for patients, physicians, and operators to provide the best products at the best prices. So
on the co-manufacturing, as far as I know, and again, it's a Department of Health rule, it's vertically integrated. So as from what I understand, it's only can be done in the MMTCs at this point. I know there's litigation out there, but right now I don't think it's changed. It's vertical from what I understand.
All right, great.
We're going in the right direction, you know. Now with our new, I don't know if, you know, anybody knows, but we do have a new president coming. And I think that it's gonna become national, and I feel like we're gonna have an administration that is gonna help us get this medicine or, you know, out hopefully more easily and in more states.
Hey,
Yeah.
Eric, just to touch on, there was a question about CBN.
Yeah, I was
that's
just about to read those two, actually.
Awesome.
So the
Yeah,
question
go ahead.
was, I've seen quite a few CBN THC products come to market recently. Is that something you are looking into, or what do you think the big opportunity is in the market? And then the other question was, what are some of you doing to improve the onset times? Or what have you been looking into or seen out there? So whichever one you guys would like to delve into, feel free.
Yeah. On the CBN side, sleep and cannabis has been a close tie to me and my relationship with the plant for, nearly 2 decades. And so, when I heard about CBN and I hear all this hype about it, I think, wow, that's awesome. I want to learn more. But, cannabis is in this phase where you're not going to have a lot of institutional research out there, right? So when people tell me about the benefits of CBN, I'm saying, okay, that's amazing. And you start to look into it and you might find out that there's not that much supporting information. And so then I turn back to consumers and I say, well, I want to find consumers that are taking CBN that speak very highly of it. And then I want to kind of understand that more. So as Pantry continues to debate internally about bringing a sleep product to market, the advice we've gotten is CBN just hasn't been researched enough to really put it forward and feel, confident in what we're doing and how we're labeling the product. And, as you've seen some other brands, they've used melatonin or valerian root or ashwagandha. These are other ingredients that are been around a lot, probably around it just as long, but they've been researched more and we know more about them and the effects that they have. So, I'm waiting. Minor cannabinoids, I want to use them. I want to implement them in our products to drive specific functional benefits. But, I think we need more research. And if institutional research is lacking, I look forward to hearing from consumers to see how their experience is with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say, Scott, you're spot on. And our research thus far shows that it does not have the benefit that it is being touted to have. So we've also avoided that, but believe in the benefit of minor cannabinoids and looking at various combinations there. Need more research on the onset time. We actually have made some great advances there. We just launched a great product in Colorado, taking it to new markets in the near term. It's our quick line of products. And so the onset is 5 to 15 minutes. There is also a defined off ramp in about 3 to 4 hours. So it's a much shorter duration, much quicker on ramp. And actually, because of the encapsulation, has more of a Delta 9 smoker's high than an 11-hydroxy edibles high. And we're seeing great feedback from consumers. It's actually the 3 SKUs that we launched of the quick product here in Colorado have made it into the top 10 edible SKUs already. So, and we launched it in March. So there's clearly demand for it. People want that. And it makes for a much better and more consistent experience when they know this is when it's going to hit me. This is when I'm going to be done with it.
Interesting.
Awesome. If anybody else wants to hit on either of those topics, as well as there were some requests to put your contact emails or phones in the chat if you can. If not, you can always reach out to Rob or myself after this and we'll try and connect you guys to the different panelists. But yeah, I think that was a great answer. And thank you for informing us about the quick and the different things that are going on out there. And as everyone is working to advance this, do more research, continue to move this forward. And as everybody knows, you should be able to save the chat or contacts before we close this out so that everybody's able to reach out and contact each other. But, once again, I want to thank everybody for getting on and learning more. I want to thank Brian from the department for all that they've been doing on these regs. We'll try and share the info on the Department of Ag webinar information of what's been going on today and tomorrow as well for you guys separately on our page after this. And then, feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and we're going to continue working as, our legislators here in Tallahassee only work a 60-day session from March to May and a couple committee weeks before that. But, we're going to continue to educate on this. And looking forward to all of you coming to Florida and trying all of your products as you get here. So once again, thanks for joining us. Thanks for everybody who was able to get on. Make sure you save the chat if that's something that will be helpful for you. And Really appreciate it. I think we had a great conversation, some great answers, and obviously an esteemed panel that we'd love to have back as this all continues to develop next time.
Thank you. It
Thanks
was
so much for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.